crack all my old bones.
I know.
Is cancel culture the true root of all violence?
Truth is a vector, not a destination.
Are politicians to blame for violence?
Enable program deep sea diving. Loading period crossing line. Loading PC roster. Visualizing season 6 of Kitchen Sink Microscopy.
Okay, welcome to another Kitchen Sink Microscopy. I'm Eric Rosenblatt. We'd love it if you'd like and share this video. Leave a comment down there. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I know you've already subscribed, so yeah.
And I'm Casey, and we write music and all that stuff that you may or may not care about. But if you do care, stick around to the end because you will have your eardrums tickled in a positive and possibly sensual way. So, what shall we talk about?
Well, here's one that's been an ongoing argument, discussion, whatever, legislative process for decades now. Do violent video games contribute to violent behavior?
I have to say no. Like, I don't really see any kind of evidence for that.
There really actually isn't much evidence for that.
Yeah, like all the same video games are played here in Germany, and there's less violence.
Yeah, it's probably
so it doesn't really like stack up at all.
no. I think it's more of a cultural thing, right? Like,
Yeah.
like okay, here's the thing, because we're like Columbine, they were like, oh, Doom. Remember that? Oh, these kids played
They
Doom,
pointed
and that's
their
what.
finger at so many things there. Marilyn Manson,
Oh
Doom.
God, yeah. Oh, music too. Oh yeah, exactly. Like violent music or whatever. Um, the
Hitler's
satanic.
birthday, like it
Yeah,
was the same
the
day as Hitler's
satanic panic in
birthday,
the
so
the
that was a
satanic
thing.
panic in the 80s too. Like,
Mhm.
remember it was like, oh, these this heavy metal music with backwards Satan stuff in it, and it's making people satanic. Like, no, it's not. I
Burning the
mean,
frog, satanic.
yeah, yeah. Well, and here's the thing too. It's like, does watching gay porn make you gay? I don't think so. Like, that's a biological thing. That's not like you're not convinced to become gay. Like I've
Yeah.
seen gay porn, and I'm not gay. Not even somewhat interested in that. Like
Well,
whatever. It's just
there is like some biological precedence for the argument that porn in particular
mm,
um, can kind of influence something like that. So, in a fetish sense, let's say,
okay. Yeah. Okay. I'll agree with that.
because when you, I don't want to get demonetized here in the first few minutes, but when you reach that certain point, uh, chemicals that make you happy go off in your brain,
Yep.
associate with whatever made the happy chemicals come.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
That's cleverly
with an
worded.
E.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's true.
Perverts.
But I mean, like you said, I think it'd be more in a fetish sense, and perhaps it could open the door a little bit. I honestly think everybody, human beings, naturally are on some spectrum bisexual. That like there could be a little bit, and but I don't think that that's like something that tips. I think you just are that way or whatever, and
But where that kind of bleeds over into the initial topic
mhm.
is Ted Bundy. There was psychologists that kind of had this theory Ted Bundy became the way he was because of his strict religious upbringing. Couldn't have any kind of porn in the house, obviously.
Mhm.
But what he could get his hands on were these like manuscripts of local crimes or something.
Mm.
And they would have like actual crime photography in there, footage of, like dead women that had been like beaten horribly and stuff. And they'd be naked.
Yeah.
So that's what he would masturbate to.
Hmm.
And these psychologists had this theory that in his mind, he associated sex with beaten dead women.
I could definitely see
And
that.
there's
Yeah.
like you can kind of see how those lines could connect.
Sure.
So the question is, video games, of course, release endorphins
Mm-hmm.
in people. Do they associate that with the violence there within? I still think no, because it's clearly not reality.
No, it's not. And I think there's a difference between um that, like the fantasy world, and then actually acting in the real world, acting out those things. Um and that maybe, in my mind, just like with a lot of like fetish stuff, in the porn realm, violent video games, if somebody has violent tendencies, that's a great way to get it out of their system, essentially, um, to basically in a safe manner that doesn't harm anybody. And yeah, you're gonna have the odd person who, well, frankly, without video games or porn, would have acted out some way, no matter what. Um, but maybe I think there's a net positive there, and that more people, like these things, violent video games, or maybe even violent music or whatever, or music extolling violence, um, might actually contribute more to preventing that, because it's sort of
Right.
like it satiates that desire inside of you,
Yeah.
In a way that is effectively the same as in reality, but it's a fantasy.
Yeah. You acted out by proxy.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, that actually makes a lot more sense than the argument that it makes people violent.
Yeah, I don't think a person who, like, if their entire life went by and they were just not a violent person, if they were like a total peacenik, that, like, if you rewound time and dropped like a bunch of Doom style FPS games or whatever, that they would suddenly like bust out and be violent. Like it's the same argument of like, making people, what's the term? I don't know why I can't remember it right now. Radicalizing people, right?
Uh-huh.
That simply reading a magazine is going to turn you into some kind of terrorist or something like that.
Right.
Like just watching somebody talk about something is going to completely alter. Well, I think it's pretty evident. Like, okay, me as an atheist, I can sit and watch the 700 Club all day long, and I'm not going to suddenly become Christian.
Yeah.
In fact, occasionally I do watch the 700 Club, like just to kind of keep my finger on the pulse of what's going on. Like, a little bit of religious stuff here and there, just kind of see what people are talking about. Yeah, but I haven't suddenly gone back to Christianity.
It's show research.
Exactly.
Yeah. The I had a thought and I think I lost it.
Uh-oh. Well, let me just throw this out there while you think. It's the same thing like watching flat earth stuff, right? Like, I watch a hell of a lot of flat earthers and flat earth debunking videos and things like that. And in fact, the more I watch the stuff that flat earthers put out, the more convinced I am the earth is as we know it to be, spherical, that kind of thing. Like, right. It's like, okay, wow, those arguments are pretty sad.
Same with religious arguments. Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember now. people always like to blame heavy metal for violence too.
Mm-hmm.
And that I think is also complete bullshit because if anything, it calms you down when you're angry.
It's like
And
listening to sad songs when you're sad.
right. And I had this girlfriend once that was like into yoga teaching and meditating and all this stuff. But behind that mantra crap was a Mothra. Like she was really violent and like would fly off the handle. And one time she ripped the bathroom door off the hinges and beat me with it. Like, well, she wasn't listening to heavy metal during any of that.
She's doing it while like Yanni music is playing in the background.
Yeah, like somebody like playing a bowl, like what?
Yeah. Well, and that right there, it's just like, yeah. So that's going the opposite direction. That listening to peaceful music doesn't make you peaceful.
Right.
That's the thing.
Doing peaceful things in general doesn't guarantee you being a peaceful person. Like,
no, I think you're just going to be the person you're going to be.
Yeah.
The influences are probably more complex than, their biological influences, environmental influences. Like, video games are an escape, just like movies or music and things. It's sort of a way to kind of displace yourself from the reality that you're in. And, if they're violent, that's fine. Like, well, maybe if you live in a violent environment, that could be your out. Essentially, it's like you're when you're sad, you're listening to sad songs, and it sort of pushes you through to kind of embrace that sadness and deal with it.
I wonder though, like, what do you think would be a viable candidate for an exterior influence on violence?
Well, your upbringing is certainly one. Like a lot of people who grew up being abused, that's where, in fact, most of the violent people, that was their upbringing. And it doesn't, I'm not saying necessarily parents or family, it could be people in your school or whatever. But those kinds of things do impact somebody.
Yeah.
I mean, especially when you're developing still. And keep in mind, we're still developing well after 21.
Well, yeah, like almost all school shootings, if I'm not mistaken, were because somebody got bullied.
Yeah.
Like,
but bullying is a big issue, I think.
Yeah. Like, and there's not really enough done to tackle that problem. I mean, it's better than it used to be.
Sure.
It's
I think it's people at least talking about it and acknowledging that bullying is a thing and it's bad is a first step. It's a good first step. But yeah, I certainly we need to reduce that, especially with young kids and stuff like that don't really know, and they're just figuring things out, and now people are talking shit to them and stuff.
Yeah.
And
I mean, I would say bullying is kind of the external force behind these violent acts, and bullying in general is actually kind of being put on a pedestal with cancel culture.
Yeah.
Like people being like, oh, you're righteous if you totally like shun and ruin this person's life and just be a complete dick to them because I said so.
That's what Hitler said.
Yeah. And that I think is like the wolf in sheep's clothing that people are completely missing.
Well, and
when they're pointing fingers at
you're right,
violence.
Bullying on its own is bad enough and can totally mess up a kid's development. But I think if you stack on top of that a really shitty home life, then you have a recipe for a serial killer, or a school shooter or something like that. And that really, as with many of these things, everything comes back to mental health. And I'm glad that at least in the US, there's a little bit more openness about, kind of like making it less of a stigma to have mental health issues and to talk about it. But we need to go further than that because I think it's probably, yeah.
Like talking about it is great, but making the actual availability of getting the help you need is like
devising
the mountain,
yeah,
and we're at the molehill,
and devising better solutions, I think, too. Like we need to really, really think long and hard about this and not just say, oh, just go get therapy, because not all therapy is created equal. And not all therapists are equipped to handle every situation. And I honestly, I think this, because this has been kind of shoved under the rug for so long, the toolbox doesn't really have the tools, the proper tools necessary to solve this problem.
What? They should really use the dating app platform to pair people with therapists.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah.
Like that's a great idea, because like you get on this app, you say what your personality style is and what you need, and then the algorithm just spits out a bunch of people that are a best fit,
Yeah.
Like,
well, I haven't tried.
I can't think of a better way to like find the right therapist.
That's a perfect idea, and I haven't tried it, but I've heard about it a lot. There's a site called BetterHelp, or a service, I guess. It's an app and a site and this and that, and you can connect with various therapists. You can kind of change therapists if it's not working. You can do therapy through video conference or phone calls or text messages or whatever you want. And that's a good thing. It's kind of expensive, but like I think we need that, like more of that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if I'm being extorted for tax money, I want my tax money I would want it to go to something like that, right? Like fund that kind of operation so people, even people with limited means, can have access to that kind of resource, because I mean, ultimately, think of all the money that's wasted dealing with like the consequences of people with mental health issues who go on shooting sprees or whatever, or killing sprees, murders and stuff. Like it, I mean, if we just had a place, like a good place where people were welcome to come and talk through their issues and get some help, like we need that. I mean, it benefits society. It's totally an absolute worthwhile thing. And the homelessness thing too, that's another one. A lot of people are homeless because of mental health issues, and drug addiction is a mental health issue. And being able to work through that stuff, like think of, I mean, it's just like, okay, if there's one thing like, I don't like tax, but if there's one thing that I think is justifiable for tax, would be that mental health.
Yep.
Like that. Absolutely. Right there is like the big one.
Well, I mean, that is absolutely available to everybody here in Germany. And still you occasionally see homeless people, and they in this instance are pretty much always suffering from some mental health problem. Of course, they can all go get help, and there are even like police ambassadors that peacefully interact with them to let them know and help facilitate getting that started. But even then, sometimes the mental health is just at a point where, like, I mean, you have to want to get better.
Yeah.
And you're not going to have 100% success rate with stuff like that.
No.
So that that said, I don't know that it would even fix 100% of violence. So there has to be other factors at play as well.
It
You know,
won't. I mean, you're never going to fix 100% of everything.
no,
Like even with homelessness or drug addiction, like you said, people have to want to get out of that, and that takes getting to a point where you kind of at your wits end, essentially, you hit rock bottom, and like, oh, okay, I better start working on this.
yeah,
But maybe if we had kind of not just like reactive but proactive mental health services that like integrated into the school system and stuff, where hey, you know what, we're always analyzing and always trying to help people and prepare people to deal with things, because a lot of times these issues that come up are things that have been going on for a long time that somebody's been going through, um, like an abusive household or something,
yeah,
and getting that figured out early is a good thing, rather than waiting for a decade or two for it to finally pop and something bad happens.
yeah. Hmm. Uh,
Well, I mean, even like think a lot, like if you're just talking financial side of homelessness, right? The people who like couldn't afford to get something, or they didn't have work or whatever, like sometimes, a lot of times, that's mental health too. People can't keep a job, they can't organize themselves, they have a spending problem or something like that, and like that kind of thing too. Like I don't think there's a one size fits all solution, um, to anything, honestly, but I think
no,
it's something that we really should be working on,
yeah, and
rather than focusing on violent video games.
right, we need to shift the blame in a more logical direction.
A more
And
productive direction.
yeah, uh, definitely. Like mm, video games, if anything, are actually kind of a positive thing. I mean, of course, if like it takes over your life, too
Yeah,
much of a good thing is a bad thing. But
exactly.
um, I mean, you can even learn from video games.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Oh,
absolutely,
that's what I was going to say. That could actually be a good mental health treatment tool,
right.
right? Especially when you add AI into the mix, where it's like paying attention to what you're doing,
Oh
and
yeah.
sort of putting things together and crafting a solution for you as you go, building the world, so to speak.
There aren't
Um,
really any AI video games yet, are there?
Not really, and not there are definitely none anything like what I was talking about there. But
Yeah.
we've had educational games that are great, like Carmen San Diego series, Oregon Trail. Like Oregon Trail was so awesome. I mean, it was an educational game, but it was so awesome that even today, you can go to Target, and Target has their own like officially sanctioned handheld Oregon Trail that plays like the old Apple Oregon Trail.
There's
Uh,
even a card game
yeah,
version.
yeah, I have that, and like it's still, people still love that game. Carmen San
Yeah.
Diego too. There's the Dr. Brain series,
Yeah, the
too.
Oregon Trail taught me that a lot of people died of dysentery.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But I mean, with what we have today, we could totally make games that are fun and educational, or fun and therapeutic, right? That like help you through a particular mental health issue that you might have. And I don't know what that's going to look like, honestly. And I don't. That's where I feel like AI is going to be the solution there, to help craft something that will actually work. Because just like educational games, so many, I mean, I've run across so many educational games that are just downright boring, like math games and stuff. Like, oh my God, like, because somebody built it
Hmm.
thinking, oh, this will be fun because it was fun to them, but it's not fun to anybody else.
Right.
And AI can be more objective, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of violent video games, I am remembering the video game we developed, Bike It.
Oh yeah, yeah. That one, yeah, you started that, and then I was like, oh dude, I'm totally gonna
I
add to
came up with like an Atari looking version, and then you were like, "Oh, I got a great idea," and like
it. Yeah,
polished it. Like
basically like a bunch of bicyclists riding on the road, and you're driving a car and you just crash into them, and that was
or
the
honk the
whole.
horn and scare them, and they're all like,
And then
"Oh!"
they fall and crash into a trash can or hit an oncoming car.
Didn't you also make it so you could like honk and scare them,
Yeah,
or like
rev
throw a
your
beer
engine.
bottle out the window?
Yep, you
Like
beer cans.
beer
You
can.
throw beer cans and knock them off their bike. I had another. I think I was going to make like more levels to that, where one like after that you were an ambulance driver going to pick up the bicyclist, but like also were hitting bicyclists at the same time. And then another one where you play as the bicyclist, and it's like you versus the car now. Uh, like the little drawing I did on the for the title screen was the bicyclist like throwing a latte behind them at a car, like a sports car, and there's a guy in the sports car flipping off the bicyclist or something like that was the idea. Like, okay, we kind of go back and forth.
Yeah.
um
Actually,
but
when you're the ambulance, like the objectives should shift. Like there's bicyclists like coming out of nowhere, and you should avoid hitting them because you're the ambulance.
yeah, because there's too many of them. It's like a bike race that you're trying to get your ambulance through.
Oh,
Yeah.
there definitely has to be like a bonus level where you come across a bike race and you're just like
Yep. Yeah. Oh
like the
man.
Street Fighter 2 where you punch in the car. Like,
Yeah. Oh man, I got to work on that again. But the thing is, like, I, there are so many video games out there that are super violent, and I mean, now people were complaining about Doom, and it was like so realistic. I mean, as if uh, there are actual demons on Earth or something that you know. But it's not that realistic, and now we have things that are fairly fairly realistic. It's a lot more realistic than it was, and yet you don't see more people committing violent acts.
yeah.
Like, now it's even more like it's almost photorealistic now, like super gory, super bloody, like way, way beyond what Doom ever was. And we don't really see more violence. It's kind of just sort of more of the same as it was in like the 90s. In fact, we're actually lower now than the 90s. The 90s was, in fact, the peak.
Hmm.
And if you look at the video games in the 90s, they weren't very realistic.
Right. Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter
Yeah.
2, like they, yeah. I mean, even the violence wasn't realistic.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Mortal Kombat, especially, they were like over the top.
Oh yeah, you
Like
pull the guy's
blood
spine
like
out.
splashing out of
Yep.
everything, and yeah, like
Well, Street Fighter, like that was, yeah, back when I was in high school, that was like the most popular arcade game. And you
mhm.
didn't see like if violent video games contribute to violence, you would think that in an arcade with a Street Fighter 2 game, right, where in the game people are punching and kicking each other and beating the shit out of each other, or Mortal Kombat, that you would see fights breaking out in the arcade. But you didn't see that. I think more fights broke out over Pac-Man than Mortal Kombat. Like it's just there's no way, or violent movies and stuff or whatever. That it it's just it's
Yeah,
an escape. It's a fantasy. Everybody knows that, and maybe okay, and this is where like ratings systems kind of are useful, and that like okay, maybe a little kid, like a 10-year-old kid, shouldn't see a super violent movie or play a super violent game. But I don't know. I mean, I saw RoboCop when I was like 12,
I was
and that's
just gonna mention RoboCop.
yeah, and like that was an R-rated movie, and I mean there was like tits and people exploding, and I think the only scene that kind of messed me up for a minute was the one where the guy fell, like crashed into the vat of some kind of chemical, and like started melting, and it
Yeah.
was like, help me.
Yeah,
Like I was like, whoa.
That one really screwed people up,
Yeah.
especially when he like stumbled into the street and like exploded
Yep.
on that car.
Yeah. But I mean, even then, I'm a pretty well-adjusted kid, or human being, even though as a kid I experienced that. It didn't. I mean, I still remember that and like, oh man, well, that was crazy. But like, whatever. I'm sure for a very small percentage of the population, maybe it might trigger something in them, but it's still a very small percentage, and like it probably would have happened in some other way anyway.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
But yeah, like in the 80s, there were a lot of these over the top gore movies, super
Mhm.
violent and
And toys too. They were like, man, I remember when I was a kid in the 80s growing up, man, there were all the toy guns and stuff like that. And me and my friends would run around with toy guns. In fact, one of my friends had an actual AK that was demilled that he would bring out. So it was, demilling basically makes it non-functional. Um, it was a non-functional but real AK-47. Um, and we'd run around the streets and have a blast, and then that was it. Like nobody like sought out a real AK and started killing people because of that.
My grandpa had a similar thing. Like it was some kind of rifle. I don't remember what kind, but it was at some point a real gun, and I used to play with that. And I remember like, wow, this thing's heavy,
Exactly. Yeah, this is no Laramie.
Yeah. But I mean, like, yeah, I don't know. Like you had just said a few minutes ago, like violence in the 90s kind of peaked. I mean, maybe there was at some point some kind of correlation between, the violence that was in movies. Video games weren't really
they were
like
not
to that level yet.
No. Well, now
just starting to in the 90s, but
I think the biggest contributor to the violence in the 90s was gang activity, because that was kind of the peak of the gangs, like the Crips and the Bloods, blah blah blah, that kind of thing. And
that was really never glorified in any games or anything.
No, maybe in music, like rap music might have possibly contributed to that a little bit, but then again, does a kid in the inner city listening to like
that's kind of the chicken and the egg, I think.
Well, yeah, like, but is that kid listening to Eazy-E suddenly gonna go join the local gang? Not because of the music. I mean, the music, I think, is a product of the times. It didn't create the gangs. It was kind of the expression out of that world. Right. A lot of that rap music that's kind of connected with gang activity. And it's still, I still listen to Eazy-E today. I have a vinyl of Easy Does It. Like, I love that stuff. Public Enemy, yeah, man, good stuff.
There was a little like 13-year-old boy on the German version of The Voice the other night, and he did an Eazy-E song.
Nice.
And he was doing really good, and then he like froze, and he like forgot all the lyrics, and he was just silent for a second, and then he was just like, fuck. I was like, that's Eazy-E right there.
Yeah.
And he totally won anyway. They were like, oh, that's gangster,
Oh man. Yeah, and I mean, I think the music certainly is more an expression. Any art is, it's expression. And does art influence culture? Yeah, to some extent, but I think culture influences art more. And video games are an art form, so it's a product of the culture from which they're born. But yeah, I mean, like I said, nowadays there are hyper realistic, I mean, VR video games and stuff that are super duper realistic, very violent, very gory, yet we see violent crime kind of just minimal, kind of going down. It kind of just goes a little up, a little down. um, I think there's more to the story than that. But as a politician, you know, an idiot essentially, it's pretty easy to just point a finger at something and be like, "Yeah, this is the problem," because you know, obviously, that's an easy thing to do, to just blame a video game and pass legislation and da 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 and stuff, rather than actually addressing the real problems, which maybe you as a politician might have contributed to, and it might be uncomfortable.
Yeah, that's typical politics. Create the boogeyman that they can, yeah, or well, it's a straw man thing, right?
Mhm.
You build the problem that you're able to tear down,
Yep.
and then everyone's like, "Oh, look at that. They tore down the problem." You know?
Yeah.
All
Well,
right.
actually, there's an incentive in politics to not solve problems because, you know, the problems are the things. Look at what every politician says in their campaigns. Like, oh, if you vote for me, I'm going to fix this thing or do this or solve this issue. You know, like if they actually did that, then what would they have? What kind of campaign promises could they have? Free cookies? You know?
I can't wait to learn enough German to really pay attention to the politics here, because it's not two party. You know, it's like a legit democracy. And yeah, like the tactics for politicking in the US is very much like, yeah, you just make empty promises,
Mhm.
and then the next election cycle you say, well, the other side blocked me from
Yep.
doing everything I promised I would.
Sure.
So you gotta let me have another 4 years at this. And
Mhm. Well, oh yeah, that, I mean, dude, that's been going on since the foundation of the US. Because I mean, things, if you look at it, look at historical trends, it's kind of flip-flopped. Like maybe there's one term for a particular party, maybe there's two, but it always goes to the other party after that, and then the blame game starts. Like, oh yeah, this issue that's going on, that was the last guy, that it was their fault, you know.
Yeah.
Easy out right there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It always has been basically two parties, even when there were no Democrats and Republicans, and it was all like Federalists and Whigs.
The way,
I mean,
exactly.
I guess there was like maybe three parties at one point or something, but like,
but it's basically been the same.
Never been enough.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that it is kind of sad, honestly, that in the US things are so polarized like that. And so it's such a stupid polarization. Like, look, come on. Why don't we, can we entertain like something other than these like huge people connected with big money and corporations and shit like that? Why can we have people with like actual solid ideas and plans and like rational thinking, stuff that isn't connected to the system?
You know what a source of violence actually is the two-party system. That makes everybody hate each other.
Yeah. Well, it's just like religions.
Yeah.
It's the same fanaticism that religions have over like zero logical, rational thinking. Like it's just like, oh, you're one of them. I hate you. Why? Why do you hate me? Because I do. Like, what?
I wonder, is there any law on the federal level about what would happen if absolutely nobody voted? Like if everybody just said, no, I'm not voting for the president because they both suck, and you won't let me choose a third party. So no.
That's
like, what if everybody just agreed, like, hey, we're all sick of this shit. Let's just stop voting. What happens then?
That would send a powerful message. And now you probably wouldn't be able to convince everybody to not vote. But imagine if, like, say, Trump won, but it was because he only had like 1,500 votes total, right? Like, imagine that. Like, what the optics of that would be? It'd be pathetic. It's like, oh yeah, you won, but like, you basically a county in Eastern Washington's worth of population voted for you. Like,
Yeah.
come on. Yeah, it would certainly. I don't know. I think that would. I would love to see that, honestly. And if you look at it too, the percentage of people who actually do vote is less than half of the population of the U.S. So
Yeah.
that, how much confidence do people have in that system that only half the people are willing to even participate, let alone, pick a particular person? It's like half
Yeah.
of that, so it's like a quarter of the population. Really?
I was just watching an old Minute Microscopy from season 1, like roughly 4 years ago, the last election cycle, and it was talking about sample sizes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I was kind of discussing the statistical reasons that what we consider like kind of small sample sizes actually are like pretty good representations of larger populations. But there's also a lot of nuance to consider. And one of the things that I had pointed out was that the percentage of people that actually come out and vote, which are identify as independent, is like 42%.
Yeah.
So basically half of the people that are actually voting are stuck picking one or the other side that they really don't even want to. So
like, if there was a viable alternative, they would have chosen that.
Yeah. So that right there tells you that things would be way different if we just opened up and let all the parties have an equal chance at winning. Like, where's the equity in our political system?
Well,
there is none.
The problem too is that both of the two main parties in the US are so entrenched that it doesn't matter how you vote. Things are going to roll on. The wheel keeps turning like it always has. I mean, yeah, maybe this little policy or that little policy will change, but basically it's the same shit.
Yeah.
No real revolutionary overhaul will ever happen with either of those parties.
Yeah.
And have you seen the debt clock? Even just in that, there's probably an overhaul due.
Equality is a two-party political system. Equity is a multi-party political system. Like, that's a good way to look at it. Like,
well, and this is the thing too. I've been told, because back when I did vote, I voted for third-party candidates almost exclusively. And I would read the statements. It wasn't a matter of like, oh, that's a D, I'm going to check that, or it's an R, I'm going to check that. No, it was more like, okay, what does this person have to say? I even voted for Good Space Guy way back in the day.
I did too.
Yeah, like, he's pretty wild and out there.
There were legitimately sometimes things that he would run for where he was the best candidate.
Yeah, well, and obviously things aren't super fantastic right now. So why keep doing things the way that we've been doing it and expecting a different result? Like, maybe we need some crazy person with weird, wild ideas out to come in and shake things up a little bit. Like, that'd be good. And we should be like entertaining that we need to be encouraging people, because like I was okay, I'm scatterbrained today. But like I was going to say, when I would do that, I'd vote for third party candidates and stuff, and people be like, oh, you're throwing your vote away. And I'm like, that's a ridiculous notion.
Mm-hmm.
So you're telling me I have to pick one of these two assholes, or I'm, like if an alternative way of thinking is like just throwing oh, I don't know. Super annoying. But
I
that is how a lot of people think, and all these independents, this huge chunk of people, they're convinced of that, probably by the system and stuff, that, hey, you gotta, don't throw your vote away. Like, well,
there's I did admit my microscopy on throwaway votes too. You'll find that up in the just on the corner of the sink there. Um, and yeah, like any vote is like it can't be wasted. Like
no.
it's impossible for it to be wasted. Like your voice is what it is.
Mhm.
You feel what you feel, you vote how you feel, and that's the reality of it. Like,
Yeah.
if you don't want to choose either one of these votes, then you know,
Don't be
putting
a
your vote,
sellout.
yeah, putting your vote toward what you want it to be,
Mm-hmm.
um, to me is less of throwing it away than just not voting at all. So
Mm-hmm.
why are they like, oh, the way you vote is just throwing it in the garbage? It's like, well, no, those two things aren't equal. Like,
No,
and even not voting is not throwing a vote away.
it's
It's
making a
saying
statement.
I
No,
don't see any reason to vote.
yeah,
Like
no
I don't feel
confidence.
heard.
Exactly. Well, and that's why I don't vote. There's a lot of people who get angry at me over that, and they're like, "Oh, well, you're the reason Trump got elected." Eh, look, I don't give
You alone
yeah,
specifically.
me. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't give two shits about Trump. You who are accusing me of getting Trump into office have done more harm than me changing hearts and minds organically out in the world, trying to affect change non-politically.
The
Like,
closest thing there is to a throwaway vote are people that say things like vote blue no matter who.
yes,
The
yeah,
people that vote based on strictly their party
yes,
choice. That's
absolutely.
a
Like, they don't
throwaway.
even.
That is
Oh, that
feeding the problem directly.
that is feeding the beast. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, you are absolutely correct. The people who just blanket check the R's or the D's or whatever, and don't even read up on somebody, don't even care. That's religious thinking too. It's like, oh, the only people that are my friends are Catholics or Jewish people or whatever, or Islamic people or something. Like,
Yeah.
these are people. Like,
Well,
they're all
like
a
I
little bit
mentioned
different.
earlier, I might normally lean more towards Democrat when it comes to policies on particular things, most particular things anyway. But like my idea of saying, "Hey, I'm voting Republican just to throw my vote away," and like that that right there shows you that like you need to treat your vote like a tactical move,
Mm-hmm.
not just think that like your one vote has all this power. Like it does not. You're a
No.
drop in the ocean. You
Well,
know?
absolutely, and maybe in certain situations, a Democrat might be the ideal candidate, or a Republican. Just depends on what their policies are,
Right.
their history. Like that. I've found people from both parties that I'm like, hey, wow, that person has some good ideas. Like, yeah, I could get behind that. Um, there you go. But then it's like, okay, well, everybody has some things you can get behind and some things maybe you disagree with. But like, well, that's human nature, right? You and
Yeah.
we get along just fine. We disagree on a bunch of things, but hey, we've been friends for Jesus forever.
I wonder if we sent out an email to Ron Paul and Bernie Sanders and said, please come on the show and just have a discussion like this, and we aren't even in it. Like,
Yeah.
And let's see if they can be as civil as we are.
Yeah,
Because
I know.
if you and I were any politician, that's probably who we would be, right?
Exactly. Yep. Actually, that would have been a really interesting pair if Ron Paul and Bernie Sanders ran together as like
Yeah.
independent, essentially, because both of them are, but they're like connected with the opposite party because that's
That
like the only
used to
chance they have.
be the way it was done.
Yeah.
The last time we had that was JFK.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
His vice president was Republican. He was
Yep.
Democrat.
But that was when like Republicans and Democrats were able to get along and actually like accomplish things together.
Yeah.
Probably the last time, in fact. And
it was the last time.
yeah, I mean, things just went downhill after that.
Yeah.
But yeah, wouldn't that be amazing though? That, because those two, Bernie Sanders and Ron Paul, like they both have really interesting ideas, and the ideas are kind of anti-establishment too,
Mhm.
which is a good thing. That establishment, the corporatocracy that we inhabit, needs to be broken down a little bit. And I think if both of them work together, well, and the thing is, like that pair, dude, Ron Paul is wildly popular.
Yeah.
Bernie Sanders, wildly popular. Like
Right.
you look at those polls early on, right? When they're running and stuff, they were like totally leading the pack by orders of magnitude. So
Mhm.
imagine if both of them joined forces, like Wonder Twins activate.
There
Like,
can't be a better pair, actually, when you think about it,
yeah.
because Ron Paul politically is probably as close as you'll see to an anarchist.
Mm-hmm.
And Bernie Sanders politically is probably the closest thing you'll see to like textbook communism, not
Mm-hmm.
like dictatorship communism, which isn't even real communism. Like
Mm-hmm.
we've never actually had communism. But real textbook communism and anarchism are basically the same thing.
Well, it's just like it. You're right, actually. That
Communism has no government. Like the
exactly.
people own everything.
Yep.
Like
And that's the thing is like, in fact, you're absolutely correct in that the communist philosophy, like the I guess neutral communist philosophy and the anarchist philosophy, all aim to achieve very similar things.
mhm.
They just kind of have doctrinal differences, I guess. But it's like even then, you'd at least have people sort of with like this kind of common goal. Like
Yeah.
we're going that way. That is the direction. This is the goal we want to achieve. We
Yeah.
just maybe don't necessarily agree on quite how to get there.
Well, yeah, like Ron Paul has more of a bottom up point of view and Bernie Sanders a top down point of
Yeah.
view, but they're both kind of aiming towards a more efficient and smaller government, like
If in fact maybe that's the way to actually achieve that. You have a president and vice president who both are like, oh yeah, I'm going to start at the bottom, you start at the top, and we'll meet in the middle.
especially if they say on their campaign, and maybe both of these guys are getting a little too old to do this,
Mm-hmm.
but if two people, like-minded people like that, paired up for a presidential election and said, we vow on the next election cycle to flip, so the other person's president and I'm vice president.
Ooh, that's a super good idea.
Because then you automatically appeal to a wider audience, because they're like, okay, well, I might not like all the policies that are in this 4-year cycle, but the one after that, I can wait for that because at least the voice is right there at number 2, like.
And it kind of gives somebody a chance to kind of take the lead with their philosophy for a little while, knowing that, okay, we're going to go and try your ideas now and see what happens. And, I think that's better than anything we've had for the last 100 years.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Except for Kennedy.
If I weren't now a German resident, I would say you and I should run for president
Yeah,
and
that
vice
would be
president,
amazing. Oh my
and
God.
then flip it the following
Yep,
cycle. You know.
exactly. Well, I guess we are kind of the next generation from those people.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, well, because it's like I want to see people's lives improve. I want people to be happier, freer, more wealthy, that kind of thing. Like things to work smoother and be more
Right.
efficient. And also, I would like to see if there is any governance. I'd like to see it be more independent of corporations.
Well, okay. So here's my thinking. The perfect formula is Sanders Paul presidency for 4 years, where all these governmental sanctioned improvements are put into place and people get used to it over 4 years. And then you have a Paul Sanders term
Yeah.
where then it's like, you know what? People are used to it now. We don't necessarily have to mandate things. Let's just let things be and see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll probably just keep going the way they have been, you know?
Well, I think people when they have like a common goal like that, and they start seeing some change that's beneficial, they're gonna carry that torch regardless.
Yeah.
And because I'd like, ultimately, that's my personal philosophy, is like, okay, let's start a direction and go in a direction, and then eventually we won't need any governance because our society will build itself into a self-governing system
Right.
that needs very, very little oversight, because people just naturally will want things. Hey, like, why would I rock the boat?
Yeah.
Because
Like
life is good. Everything's good. We're getting along. We're all making money. We're happy. Everything's good.
I, okay, I'll just put this out there because, Biden's already got his vice president kind of locked in, let's say. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
he probably could pick a new one, but a new running mate. But Trump should ask Bernie Sanders to be his vice president
Yeah.
when this comes to election time, because uh that would be the ultimate bridge, the
Yes.
ultimate like olive branch situation where
Mm-hmm.
people can finally be like, like all these Bernie fans would be like, oh God, I hate Trump, but Bernie's right there.
Yeah. And the vice
So,
president isn't weak by any means.
right. So, I mean, like, not that not that I ever expect Trump to even hear this, but please do that. Like,
Yeah.
if you're gonna run, have Bernie Sanders as your running mate.
That
Like,
that dude, that
you
would be a
appeal to a wider crowd, you'll
yes.
probably win then.
And that would be a baller move too.
Oh yeah.
Oh, that would, man. The establishment would not
And
like that.
I tell you what, Bernie Sanders, I bet he would be on board with that. As much as he hates and disagrees with Trump, he would absolutely be like, you know what? We're adults, we're professionals,
Mm-hmm.
we'll work together. We disagree on a lot of things, but this will give us a chance to talk them over,
Mm-hmm.
in a public forum with the American people. Like, that's the exact way he talks, like,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
he always walks the way he talks.
Yep.
So, like, that would be awesome, actually. Like,
And
I
and,
mean,
and it would also,
not that I want Trump to be president, but that would be awesome to have
oh,
Trump and
what
Bernie
about
Sanders
yeah, it
as
would
a
be,
team.
and it would provide a pretty effective counterbalance as well. Like
Mhm.
it, like, cool off the heat from that side.
Yeah,
So
and
have
I
you
mean,
been?
of course, there would be people saying, "Oh, then the Democrats are just going to try to impeach him, and then Bernie will be in power." And it's like, I mean, yeah, that
Well,
might happen,
I guess. I mean,
but like the one positive about having a total 50-50 divided government is that nothing ever gets done.
yeah.
So he'll never get impeached or he'll never like get to the point of being removed from office, like, so don't worry.
I mean, it would be a pretty remarkable like setup. Like
Yeah.
I'd like to see that.
Yeah.
Actually, so what do you think about the recent events in Argentina? I don't know if you've followed that.
I don't actually know what happened.
So they elected an anarchist as president, and
Interesting.
he's basically like shutting down all these programs to kind of reset things because
Huh.
like so when he took office, the coffers were empty. There was no money. Like basically that entire country was completely broke
Wow.
and in debt and like just a mess. People are poor. It's just a shitty situation. And so he's like, you know what? We're gonna rip this band-aid off. I'm gonna shut down everything, and then we're gonna start all over again. And it seems to be
That's
working
the
so
right
far.
thing to do.
Yeah, like kind of wild. But yeah, so I'm following it really, really closely because it's kind of interesting. Now, obviously, that's Argentina is one of the more challenging countries to go into and try to like run it as an anarchist. Like that's that's a really challenging place, like probably one of the most. So if it doesn't succeed, I'm not going to be surprised. But hey, you never know. Maybe you'll see Argentina flourish and be a beacon of awesomeness for the region. That'd be cool. But he's got a lot of support. There's a lot of people who are also protesting because they're like, "Oh my God, getting rid of these programs!" And da, da, da. And he's like, "They're unsustainable. We have no money, literally no money. You know, we got to do something different. We got to come at it from a different angle." And I applaud him for that. Like,
That will be interesting, actually, to see. Like I mentioned earlier, um, people kind of just keep going with what they've been doing. So you remove these programs, and people will probably just find a way to keep whatever effect they had in motion as best they can.
Well, and
Of course, it changes, but
exactly. But at least in the absence of that, it allows you to craft something a little more effective. When it's entrenched, it's really hard to change anything. Nobody wants to change. It's
Yeah.
like, so my philosophy for cleaning a room, um, you know, I started back when I was living with my parents. That I was like, oh my God, my room is a mess. Like, oh, there's shit everywhere, and it just seemed like an impossible task. But I figured out a way to actually clean that worked, and that is take everything out of the room until I have just an empty room with nothing, and then look at the stuff that I took out and put things back as I see fit. Oh, like, okay, I'm going to put this desk over there. I'll put this thing up on the wall, that kind of thing. And then you find, oh, actually, half this shit I don't even need. What the hell is this here for? What is this box of papers and stuff? Throw that away. Why is that taking up space in my room? And that's a really good way to clean. And when it comes to governance, that's probably a good way to clean too. Like,
you know what?
just take it all apart and put it all back.
One good use I can think of for patents would be on laws. There should be patents on laws, and they should be, locked in for a certain number of years, not many, mind you.
Yeah.
And then they basically become open source. And so, like all those regulations now no longer exist. And see what happens. And then also you have to build in kind of like a grace period where you can't just go and vote in the same thing again. Like it has to run anarchist style for at least half as long, let's say, as
well, like changing your password, right? Most systems, if you change your password, you put a one after something, and then you put a two. You go like the next time you have to change, you go to put a one in. It's like, hey, wait a minute, you just had that password. Like you got to wait a while,
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
Right. And I mean, we've kind of seen this work in action with the pandemic.
Mhm.
So much changed, and people kind of got used to it over a couple of years.
Mhm.
And then when things started to relax, a few things went back to normal and a few things stayed the way that they had been for a couple of years.
Yeah, in fact, before the before that, like I never saw anybody walking around here wearing a mask. Um, and then, oh, it's required for a while, and everybody had to put something on, even begrudgingly, like that kind of thing.
Mhm.
And now, no one's required, but I still see people occasionally walking around wearing a mask. Like,
Yeah.
huh, hey, all
Like
right. No, and no one's freaking out.
it makes
No
sense.
one's
I'm
like,
glad that's normalized. Like
mhm.
if you're sick and you have to go to the store, just put a fucking mask on for
Yeah,
half an hour, you know? Like
exactly. And now there's no stigma. I mean, it's kind of annoyed that it got politicized. That like, oh well, you must be one of those. You're wearing a mask. You must be one of those lefties or something. Like, what? How did that even happen? I have no idea.
that
But
was stupid.
you're gonna. The thing is, as the heat cools off a little bit, people will start to react less and less to that, and to the point where it's like it'll just become a normal thing, like it is in Asian countries. You go
Yeah.
there, people, if they're sick, they wear a mask in public. Nobody's, it's not politicized there. It's just like a normal thing. Like, oh yeah, yeah, protect other people from getting sick from you, and also signal to other people that I might be contagious. You might want to
Yeah.
maybe not get too close. It's an easy thing to do.
Like
Not much of an inconvenience.
I kind of get extra annoyed now. Like I get on a plane and somebody's coughing and not wearing a mask, and then I
Mhm.
get sick, and it's like,
Yeah,
you asshole. Like
exactly. Like,
you totally could have prevented
but
getting other people sick, but
you
no.
probably have a whole closet full of boxes of masks because I mean they were given away like candy.
Yeah.
Like, and yeah, we
Any mask is better than no mask, too.
like,
Like,
exactly. Like, man, don't get into a confined space with a bunch of people when you're fucking sick. That's inconsiderate. And
yeah.
if you have to, like, oh yeah, I've got to fly to this place or whatever, yeah, put a mask on. It's not that big of a deal. Like, man, but yeah, I think man, this has gone all over the place in a
Yeah,
good
but
way.
there's a lot of great ideas in here.
Mm-hmm. As usual.
Yeah, like the idea of like either nobody voting for anybody at all
Mm-hmm.
or having somebody run a Democrat Republican ticket again, just
Yeah.
like over 50 years ago was the last time that happened, almost
Mm-hmm.
60 years ago, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Over 60 years.
Kennedy's
So
one of my favorite presidents too. Like, oh man.
yeah,
Well,
so like let's try something that used to work because it'll probably still work.
and we're divided enough as it is. I mean, there's people talking about Civil War 2.0 and stuff like what, you know what? Maybe we should be coming together. Like
Yeah.
maybe this divide, maybe it's time to bury the hatchet and try to work together and actually do something good. Like actually affect change in a positive way. Stop bickering and arguing and fighting in the streets over shit, and defriending people both online and in real life. Like, oh my god, there are people. That's the thing. It's like back in the days of Kennedy, if you voted for Kennedy or didn't, you didn't see people like, oh, I'm never going to talk to you again because you voted for Kennedy, or you didn't vote for Kennedy, you voted for the opposition. Like people just carried on and they're like, okay, fair enough. And nowadays, people will like physically fight people. And if not that, like family, members of families will never talk to somebody again because they voted for somebody. Like, really? How have we come to this? What?
I think it's so funny. Like the last time I saw your dad, he like, I don't even know what prompted him to say this, but he was like, I'm the guy that voted for Nixon twice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Right on.
Probably doesn't kind of regrets it at this point, but you know. Oh man, that's funny. God,
But I
yeah,
wish
that
more people would take politics that seriously, like make jokes about it.
it
And,
it
like,
should be something we can laugh about.
yeah.
Like it I mean, it's like religions, the harmful side of religion, the senseless anger and hatred and violence between people who just simply think differently. That how is that how is that wrong? If somebody thinks differently, have a conversation with them. Pop open a Heineken or two and have a conversation, for God's
It's
sake.
all the absolutes,
Yeah.
like, you know, I'm the one and only God. And just saying that implies everybody else must be wrong then. So I
Mhm.
have to tell them how wrong they are.
But the thing is, every religion says that.
Yeah.
So who's right? My answer is that you're all wrong.
Yeah.
That's the most logical answer. Is no, you're every single one of you is
Yeah.
incorrect.
Not a single one has ever had any empirical evidence whatsoever
Nope.
of their God existing. So yeah, they're all wrong. Like,
But and yet wars were fought between those factions over those disagreements.
God damn.
So how many millions and millions of people have died because of just a difference in belief?
That there you like violence in video games, nah, bullshit. Violence in religion, violence in politics.
Yeah.
These are the sources of our fucking problems, people. Like, ditch the religion, ditch the politics, at least like the bipolar
Yeah.
politics. Like you have to have politics, but like
Well, you can
it's
still have
never black and
spiritual.
white.
You
It's
can still
never
have
black and white.
spiritual beliefs too, but
Yeah.
it's like
But
I
you don't
think
need
that
religion for
no,
spirituality.
no. I think people who are like leaning Christian could easily get along with people that are leaning Muslim. Like, I mean, really, if you look at it, you guys think the same fucking thing. All of your doctrines are basically the same.
Yeah.
Like,
Meanwhile, here's this show, or like next week, we're gonna have somebody on to talk about tarot, and you and I are atheists, and you're into tarot, and I'm not, and
mhm.
like
Yeah,
that's how it should be. We should be
it
able to
should be.
talk about things, even if we don't necessarily like believe in them or like whatever.
Exactly. Well,
Like,
and especially when it comes to problem solving. Imagine if there were like two big factions of engineers that believed like kind of different ways of doing things, and they would argue about stuff, and here we're building buildings this way or that way, and that, and like okay, look, it just it's very ineffectual. It's unproductive to have that kind of polarization. Like engineering is all about going to the core of the matter and solving a problem in the simplest, cheapest way possible, and maintaining safety, as much safety as possible. That balance and stuff. Like, sure, engineers argue and disagree about things, but at the end of the day, the goal is the same. Like, you want safety, you want things to be built well, you want things to be cheap, like that kind of thing, efficient, and so
except for civil engineers.
they're all crack smokers.
Yeah.
Oh man,
They
yeah,
do
but
not have safety in mind. I'm convinced of
no,
that.
or cheapness. Like, and yes, I know those things are kind of at odds with each other. There's a classic saying about that, but that is the goal, and it's just like the truth, right? There is no such thing as the truth. The truth is a vector, not a destination, and that's what we should be striving towards. And
Mhm.
when it comes to governance and politics and whatnot, we should be striving towards building a better future for everybody, and not like factionizing things. Like, why? What purpose does that serve other than to make it happen slower and less efficient? Like,
Right.
we're burning a huge amount of, look at all the, like, how much money is spent just on politicians campaigning. Why?
Yeah.
Can't your voice be sufficient enough in this day and age? All you have to do is go online and speak and gain a following of people who believe in what you believe. That's all it takes. You don't need to spend money. There doesn't have to be a bunch of debates. You don't have to pigeonhole yourself into a particular pocket. Just be yourself, speak your mind, share your thoughts, and let's work together to build a better future.
Yeah.
There you go. Like, it doesn't take much more than that.
What you said was really impactful. The truth is a vector, not a destination.
Mm-hmm.
And the best example I can think of that exemplifies how true that is that racism is not something that you can just flip a switch and solve.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, people often criticize that, there are people who are still alive that remember when drinking fountains were segregated.
Mm-hmm.
But had we not taken that small step to get over that, we wouldn't have all these generations, so many generations after that saying, wow, that was ridiculous. Like,
mm-hmm.
and that's how you get on the right path. We're on the right path.
We are. Absolutely.
Like, all this focus on the negative, all this like, oh, we're so racist, blah, 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 like bullshit. That's absolute bullshit.
It is.
You pick any point in the past and compare where we are, as long as it's less racist, we're doing good.
Exactly. Less bigoted in general. Like, bigotry will always exist, and racism will probably always exist. But we want to get to the point where there's as little of it as possible. And
I mean, I would argue that we're actually moving backwards as far as bigotry
currently
goes.
we are, yes, because of this hyperfixation on race. Like,
well, not just that, but like, cancel culture is bigotry.
Yeah.
And, old school bigotry is still bigotry, and it's still around. You
Yeah.
know, like, so now we've got it on two fronts.
Yep.
It's getting worse.
I know. Well, and that's the thing. Eyes on the target, basically. Like, we should be not looking at how things currently are. We should be looking at where we're going. Like, we want to be there. That's where we need to be. Like, sure, maybe it sucks right now. It's not as good as it could be, but okay, then look behind you. How was it? Where did you come from? I still keep all my old video games that I programmed and old drawings that I drew and songs that I wrote and stuff, and compare them. Like, oh my God, some of them are absolute garbage. But like, I can look at that and be like, wow, I have come so far from where I started. I am miles away from that, light years in some cases away from that. Like, and that's a good feeling, and it incentivizes me to keep improving and making things better. That like, wow, if I was able to get from here to there, well, I can get from there to there. Like, now with all the skills I've built, it should be simple. It should be child's play at this point. And yeah, we it's just it's all these people looking like complaining about the fact that we don't have this perfect utopia that everybody's dreaming about. Like, well, we're never going to get there in our lifetime, but we should at least be going a little closer to that if we can.
Yep.
Like, every step that we take up that mountain leads us closer to the peak. Damn, that was
every move we make, every breath we take.
That was a creeper song, by the way.
Yeah.
People think of that as like a love song. No, that's like a stalker song. I'll be watching you. Like, come on.
And then Puff Daddy takes it and turns it into like this tribute song to Notorious B.I.G. Like, what are
Well,
you
hey,
trying to say, bro?
yeah, I know. Like, is he a stalker? Oh man.
I'm gonna miss watching you get in the shower.
I mean, whatever floats your boat, bro. But damn. Oh yeah. I mean, that's the thing. It's like cultural appropriation is another thing. Like that's a good thing. That's not a bad thing. That's
Yeah.
cultures intertwine. That's what we do as human beings. We see somebody that's different and we're like, wow, that's cool. I want to do that too. I want to
Yeah.
wear that outfit. Damn, look at that hat. That's awesome. Like people admire other cultures and want to become intertwined with them. And that's a
I
good thing.
you know what? It's so cool. Like I'm right now taking an intensive language course, and there's people from Turkey, Ukraine, Brazil, Nigeria, America, um, and like Mongolia. So I mean, you've got every continent that is habitated by indigenous humans
Mhm.
represented in this one small class. And
Yeah.
that's super awesome. Like that's a blending of culture and like we
Yeah.
all get along,
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's the thing is like people all have that common goal of learning the language, and
Mhm.
there you go. And there's different challenges for each people because obviously language structure is different between the different cultures, and so it's like yeah, if you know English or Spanish, it's pretty easy to learn German, but if you speak Farsi, it might be a little more difficult, or whatever. Chinese maybe. Geez, God, Chinese is like one of the most difficult languages. Jesus. Well, when it comes to writing, at least.
Yeah.
Oh, if you want to, speaking of Chinese, if you want a really interesting video or documentary or something, look up the history of how China created the keyboard. It's fucking incredible, and like it's actually back in the 80s they solved predictive input for text input. Um,
Huh.
yeah, and that actually the thing that brought China from an agrarian society to like an industrial powerhouse was the development of that keyboard input system.
Oh.
Like that
Huh.
was what it took. Once that took hold, boom, they were on fire after that. Kind of wild. It just
Wow.
shows you how language is kind of critical to progress.
Huh. Fascinating. Well, I think
We've
we
gone
covered a lot of
all
ground.
we've gone everywhere. Hmm.
Damn.
Amazing as usual. The seed of something that seems so like, oh, we could only talk about that for 10 minutes turns into this like hour and a half long tree. Hmm.
Well,
Man.
yeah, shit. If you got any comments about anything we've discussed, from violent video games to political revolutions, non-violent in nature,
Yes.
um, please leave them in the comment section.
Yeah. I'd love to hear what people have to say about all this. I mean, there's a lot of food for thought here.
Oh yeah, yeah.
All right. Well, enjoy the song on the way out, everybody. I'm sure it'll be a good one. Or maybe I'll put in one of my really shitty songs from a long time ago, from the early days.
Well,
Maybe
I've been
even
going back and like redoing some old songs that like were a good idea, but I did them really shitty.
yep, yep. And that's the thing. It's like before you had the skill set to be able to
Mhm.
realize what was in your head, or maybe even just like the software or hardware or whatever. Yeah, because I have some great songs that I did. The elements are really good, but the execution is pretty crappy.
Yeah.
Um, very repetitious. That was my thing back in the day. Yeah.
All
So
right.
maybe I'll put in something from like 1991 or something like that.
Damn.
Yeah, back before I was using samples, even I could do that.
Jeez.
I don't know. Maybe we'll see. We'll see how I feel. All right.
Thanks for deep sync fighting with us.